The southwest coast of Ireland seems far away from the dirty, treacherous world of oil. But we're here to meet a man who believes that that world could soon come to an end. Everyone calls Colin Campbell Mr. Peak Oil. He's a geologist who's worked with all the leading oil companies and has predicted the decline of oil.
I'm predicting the end of the world. You know, some people describe me as a sort of doomsayer. And there's a certain reality, yes, because I've come to realize that the modern world runs on oil. We're certainly not talking about the end of oil, no. The end of oil, we may never face the end of oil because who can say the last barrel to be found or produced could go on for a long, long time. What we do face is the peak of oil right now.
The biggest refinery in the world is nicknamed Hell's Alley. When there's no sea breeze, the air is unbreathable. The oil that's burnt and transformed here comes from every continent. Tankers have crossed every ocean to satisfy America's appetite for black gold. 250 million automobiles wait impatiently for their rightful supplies. It's the price of the American way of life. But the real story, the secret story of oil, begins far from Houston, in Scotland, in the heart of the Highlands, at Achnacarry Castle on August 28, 1928. Under the pretext of a hunting party, 3 men have an appointment here: a Dutchman, an American, and an Englishman. This pheasant and grouse hunt was never filmed. There are no photos or archive records, but this is probably how it happened. The Dutchman is Henry Detterding, an implacable and determined man nicknamed the Napoleon of oil. He runs the all-powerful Royal Dutch Shell. The American is Walter C. Teagle. He represents the Standard Oil Company, founded by John D. Rockefeller at the age of 31, the future Exxon. The Englishman, Sir John Cadman, director of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, soon to become BP. At the castle, the leading lights of the oil trade are seated, and their secret meeting can begin. The world needs oil, and the companies are engaged in a pitiless battle. War is perhaps good for business, but competition is not. Henry Detterding declares, "It is time to exploit, fraternally and to the greatest profit, the world's oil resources. Production zones, transport costs, sales prices, everything must be agreed and shared. A secret pact is sealed, but with no signatures. The great oil cartel can prepare to dominate the world."
Las Siete Hermanas en realidad son un gran cartel, por no decir una mafia transnacional, que se ha apoderado del petróleo de distintos países petroleros y prácticamente se reparten no solamente la ganancia que produce el petróleo, sino que se reparten también el control del mundo.
On this morning of August 29, 1928, the world order has changed. Other companies would soon join the billionaires' conspiracy. History will call them the Seven Sisters. Colin Campbell spends a quiet retirement here, among the pubs and coloured houses in the Irish village of Ballydehob. As the head of the Association for the Study of Peak Oil, Colin is not concerned about whether peak oil exists, but when it will happen. It's a reality the world refuses to accept. But a barrel of oil, says Campbell, is like a barrel of beer. The faster you drink, the sooner it's finished.
There's no doubt that the decline of oil will make those who continue to have a large share, which is mainly the Middle East, will be under increasing pressure from China and the United States, and lesser degree Europe and other countries, to produce that oil. But they will be under pressure to produce, and they may be under military pressure.
As far as the eye can see, amidst the cotton fields, tens of thousands of nodding donkeys shake their heads. They've been pumping the very blood of the American economy for more than 100 years, an archetypal image for generations. In the Texas of cowboys and prime beef, oil is akin to a religion, a lifestyle. all-powerful in making and breaking fortunes. It's said here that there are two curses, communism and taxes. But in this land of free enterprise, there are no income taxes, and everyone owns the ground and resources beneath their own property. There are over 1,300 oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, and in Texas, more than 150,000 active oil wells. The companies are often family-owned. This morning, we have an appointment with Doug Robinson, an oil man born and bred.
Being third generation oil, my grandfather, my father, the oil business is in our blood. We like the risk of the oil and gas industry. And there are those who have been very, very rich and very, very poor many times over. And so it's a part of the legend of West Texas.
Texas is also the home state of George W. Bush. Hailing from the town of Midland, the Bushes are a dynasty where oil mixes with politics. The grandfather, Senator Prescott, made his fortune at the head of a bank that supported the Nazi war effort. He advised his sons, get rich and get into politics. His son George grew rich from oil and became president of the United States. His grandson George W. lost a fortune in oil, but became president anyway. Saturday night in downtown Midland. Farmers and oilmen celebrate the latest fluctuations in oil prices. Broke on Saturday, rich on Monday. Oil is expensive to produce in the USA, and the politicians are duty-bound to protect the smallholders. It's a simple equation. No environmental regulation, high prices, and American oil can be profitable. Every American president has known this, and oilmen have forever financed their campaigns. Texas is a patriotic land, and if a war has to be fought against so-called terrorists or to protect overseas oil fields, the boys are only too willing.
Oil is strategic. You have to have it. And if you don't have it, then the people that are doing without it are going to come take it away from you to get it. It's like food. If you don't have food, you're going to be forced to go get it.
On the other side of the globe, the Shatt al-Arab is where the Tigris meets the Euphrates. This launch, belonging to the South Oil Company, is heading for the Al-Bakr offshore terminal near Basra. An American patrol boards. No one can approach the terminal without permission. Even the director of South Oil, an Iraqi, has to comply. 85% of Iraqi oil passes through Basra. The terminal is of vital importance, and its protection top priority. Iraqi oil under American control. For the Iraqi employees, this was the ultimate humiliation.
منطقيا لا أقبل هذا الشيء وأتمنى أنه يكون التفتيش بيد العراقيين حصراً. أتمنى خروج المحتل بالسرعة الممكنة. اللي نقر هذا الشيء كعراقيين ككل، يعني احنا ظلمنا في العهد صدام مرتين. ظلمنا في حياة صدام وفي ممات صدام. في حياته كان هو مسيطر النظام مالته الظالم، وفي موته جاب قوات الاحتلال.
As the American tankers are filled with Iraqi oil, we head north to Baghdad. It's a chaotic city. Bombs explode frequently. But it's not clear who the enemy is. The patrols are Iraqi, the uniforms and weapons supplied by the USA. We are here to meet a former oil minister.
But when we look at the whole of Iraq, Iraq is also rich in oil everywhere. And just for your information, being an oilman, although Iraq was one of the earliest oil producer in the region, it is the least explored, okay? The success ratio, I mean, if we drill 100 wells in Iraq, 73 wells would hit oil. This is the historical, experience. So there is so much oil in the region of Kurdistan, and now we are hearing about new discoveries, and I'm not surprised at all.
The road to the north, towards the mountains of Iraq's northern Kurdish region. A land of shepherds, for a long time ruled and dominated by Baghdad, this region has discovered potential oil wealth and dreams of independence. A nightmare for the centralized regime in Baghdad. In 2007, the Kurdish parliament unanimously approved a new oil law, granting the local authorities the freedom to deliver licenses and exports without referring to Baghdad. It was party time in Erbil, the capital of this region. On June 3, 2009, Iraqi President Jalal Talabani and Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani opened up the flow of Kurdish oil. With a flag, a military force, a national anthem, and a language, Iraq's Kurdish north is ready to become a nation. Since the American troops withdrew, there have been battles between Kurds, Shias, and Sunnis. The Kurds dream of taking Kirkuk as their capital. But Kirkuk is oil-rich, very rich, and Baghdad has no intention of letting it go. In October 2009, Baghdad switched off the Kurdish oil taps. The oil produced in this region now had to flow through Iraqi pipelines. The oil revenues were to be centralized in Baghdad, and Iraq's northern Kurds would receive 17% of state income. The question of sharing the oil money became a potential motive for civil war.
The present situation, there are a number of perhaps 28 contracts that have been awarded by the federal region of Kurdistan to oil companies without coordination with the federal government in Iraq. And this, of course, led to frictions between the Minister of Oil and the Minister of Natural Resources in Kurdistan. One of the points that we really upset, people, oilmen and regulators in Baghdad is that those contracts were not awarded in the spirit that we and the arrangement that we agreed on in the draft law.
200,000 Kurdish fighters, the Peshmerga, or those who face death, ensure the region's security. The new wealth and the probable autonomy of the region are a cause for concern among the neighboring countries, all with substantial Kurd communities: Turkey, Syria, and Iran. Oil may bring riches, but also rivalries and resentment.
لبروی برنگنانی نوت لان کرد خویوا خالشی زور به هزا بو بتوانه آینده چی زور باش بو هرمی کردستان پلقینه ام آینده بگمان کاریگری لسر ولاتانی سوریا و ترکیا و ایرانی جه بویا تنها عراق نیه کدجی اوه رنگ ولاتانی دراوسیش پیان خوش نبی که کرد خوانی نوت بی و خوی بتوانه نوت برهم بینه و داهاتکشی بو کرد خوی بی.
Iran keeps a watchful eye over the friction between the Kurds and Baghdad. The American-led war in the region gave Tehran considerable potential for interfering. A political influence in the region that, for many years, means that any president in Baghdad must have Iran's blessing. Once again, the United States opened up a Pandora's box and had a hard time closing it. Baghdad blocks the Kurdish oil exports, and so the refined petrol convoys head to neighboring Iran. A vast, strange traffic flow. and the Iraqi Kurdish oil bypasses Baghdad. Isolated by a US-imposed embargo, Iran lacks refineries. It has to import a considerable proportion of its petrol, an absurd paradox for the world's third biggest oil producer.
L'Iran a des ressources considérables qui sont elles aussi sous-exploitées parce que l'Iran fait l'objet de sanctions internationales et de sanctions américaines de la part des États-Unis qui visent pour partie son secteur pétrolier et gazier et qui amènent les grandes compagnies pétrolières occidentales à refuser de plus en plus, de droit ou de fait, de travailler en Iran. Donc l'Iran est de plus en plus isolé alors qu'il a besoin d'investissements étrangers massifs pour développer son potentiel pétrolier et gazier qui est considérable. Dans tous les cas, l'Iran est dans les 3 premiers détenteurs de réserves pétrolières et gazières, ce qui lui donne un rôle essentiel pour les équilibres énergétiques futurs.
In Tehran, there are calls for an economic jihad. With inflation, unemployment, and a lack of freedom, discontent is growing. Oil revenues fund projects for appeasing the poorer populations, the regime's main supporters. The American embargo has proved to be an effective weapon in this respect. But apart from oil, Iran has nothing to export, except pistachios and carpets.
Our friend Iranian, we have to tame them and we have to be friendly with them. They also have, they control the Al-Hormuz entrance to the Arabian Gulf. And also they control the inflow of oil to the world. They are in Iraq, they are in Gaza, they are in Lebanon. They are almost in the region where the hot points, they are there. And they have the so-called the nuclear. So they are disturbing everybody. Not only the local region, but also the international. And everybody is worried.
The Americans too fear Tehran's wrath. The Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Iran is one of the most strategically important and vulnerable places on the planet. The US Navy's 5th Fleet watches over the world's most important sea passage. More than 15 million barrels of oil pass through the strait every day. The foreign press have been invited today. There are no censors in sight. The giant South Pars Iranian oil and gas complex needs foreign investment. It's vital. Since 1996, the American embargo has been choking the world's 3rd biggest oil producer. The vice is tightening around the regime, which the US accuses of developing nuclear weapons. The last oil giants, Total and Shell, have pulled out. The embargo has intensified. The last companies operating here are Chinese, Indian, and Malaysian.
所以说，至于西方的这种指责，是吧？比如说是，美国，担心伊朗发展核武器，是吧？或者是说和伊朗有可能发生冲突啊，然后中国还要去发展和伊朗的关系，这样的话就这种指责，我认为还是没什么道理的，因为你和某个国家关系不好，并不能排斥其他国家和这个关系不好。我只要是合法，是吧？我没有违背联合国的这种基本的一些游戏规则的话，那我这种行为就是我认为就是正常的。所以说，我不认同你刚才讲的西方人的这种观点。如果按照这样的逻辑的话，那你只要是和美国关系都不好，那其他国家都不能和这个国家去建立关系，那这显然是。
We have our new friend is coming, China. They are ambitious, and they want to see more. And if they are number 2 in the world economy, that's not going to be for long, because they want to be number 1. And to be number 1, they have to have oil.
Tiananmen Square, scene of the 1989 massacre. On the facade of the imperial city, a portrait of Mao Zedong and the motto, "Long live the People's Republic of China." To survive, China needs oil, a lot of oil. But China is not alone. The world's 2 biggest oil consumers, China and the United States, are waging a pitiless battle in the ongoing energy race. For the moment, it's being fought on economic and diplomatic grounds.
Like the United States, China is very, very concerned about energy security. It's worried about the security of supply, about disruptions. And it's worried, like the United States, that it is excessively dependent on the Middle East. Now, there's some irony there. On one hand, China depends on the United States to ensure stability of the Middle East. On the other hand, China is fearful of being overdependent on the United States, that in the event of a clash with the United States, the US Navy could seal the Persian Gulf to Chinese ships.
80% of China's oil imports pass through the Strait of Malacca, between Malaysia and Indonesia. Transport that the American Navy could easily interrupt. And so Beijing reinforces its naval capacity.
中国现在进口的石油呢，应该说是逐渐的有点就是分散多元化，因为过去呢主要是从中东进口石油。那么现在呢，就是说除了中东以外，中国的石油来源呢，比如说像非洲、像南美洲，像这个中亚，包括还有俄罗斯。
For the last 30 years, China grew annually at 10%. Its appetite for oil appears limitless. The country has set off to conquer the world. The Middle East, Africa, and now South America. This is the story of the Seven Sisters Cartel, a group of companies that dominate the world's petroleum industry. Exxon, Shell, BP, Mobil, Texaco, Gulf, and Chevron. It began with a secret meeting between 3 top oil traders back in 1928 and a secret pact to start exploiting the world's oil resources. The first navigators called Venezuela Tierra de Gracia, the land of grace. For almost a century, South America's oil made fortunes for the Seven Sisters. Loaded in the ports of Venezuela and Mexico, it set sail for the refineries of Houston and Port Arthur.
Cuando yo entré aquí en el año 80, los barcos en las antiguas filiales no había un control fiscal del petróleo como tal, se exportaba petróleo a granel y se llevaron mucha por la producción, los yacimientos de nuestros pozos fueron explotados indiscriminadamente por las antiguas filiales y inclusive era como regalado, no pagaban impuestos al país, o sea, el petróleo, los beneficios del petróleo no se quedaban aquí, se lo llevaban los grandes transnacionales.
In the north of Venezuela is Lake Maracaibo, home to the PDVSA, the national oil company, and the scene of some of the worst plundering in the history of oil. In the 1920s, the dictator General Juan Vincent Gomez opened Venezuela's doors to the oil majors. They all enjoyed the spoils, giving generous kickbacks to the general and his clan. Despite the corruption, it was worth it. The reserves were colossal. Lake Maracaibo was covered with hundreds of derricks and wells. Venezuela became the world's second biggest oil producer after the United States. The Seven Sisters ruled the roost.
Nosotros no tenemos la menor duda de que los verdaderos dueños del petróleo en Venezuela, durante mucho tiempo, o en el menor de los casos, los que tuvieron la última palabra en qué hacer con el petróleo en Venezuela fueron las transnacionales y principalmente las transnacionales norteamericanas. Justamente en esta ciudad, en la ciudad de Maracaibo, y justamente en este estado fue que se comenzó hace aproximadamente 100 años la explotación petrolera. Unos pozos que irrumpieron con una fuerza natural y que convirtió a esta zona justamente en una zona de referencia internacional.
February 1999. Colonel Hugo Chavez is elected president of Venezuela. Like his model, the Libertador, the legendary Simón Bolívar, President Chavez dreamed of liberating his country and all Latin America. Soon, this would make Chavez a serious thorn in the side of the United States.
Y Venezuela era un abastecedor, sigue siendo un abastecedor, pero en términos de soberanía de Venezuela de petróleo en Estados Unidos, entonces las posiciones que desde Venezuela viene asumiendo el presidente Chávez, que son en línea contraria totalmente de lo que antes se hacía en el país, hacen ver al presidente Chávez como un enemigo de la filosofía de esas transnacionales.
The new president had ambitions, building hundreds of schools and thousands of homes, creating agricultural cooperatives, and introducing widespread access to healthcare. The production of 3 million barrels a day and high oil prices enabled the president to spend and spend again. Oil as the fuel of social transformation. In the heart of the barrios of Caracas, this is the Misión Ribas, a social center for the most underprivileged, financed by the National Oil Company. A center for education, health, food aid, and workers' cooperatives. Everything is organized and managed by the people who live in this neighborhood.
Entonces nosotros aquí dirigimos, somos jefas, ¿verdad? Porque aquí no hay un jefe, sino todas nos regimos por la misma ley de cooperativa. Entonces, no tenemos un jefe que nos regañe. Entonces, por lo tanto, nosotros somos dueñas. ¿Y de dónde viene esto? Del petróleo, de los recursos del petróleo, de lo que nos pagan, ¿verdad? Por vender el petróleo. Entonces, ahí tenemos todas esas buenas cosas. Salud, educación, alimentación, yo creo que es para que un pueblo eche adelante.
Confrontation was inevitable. On April 12, 2002, a coup d'etat was organized against Chavez, concocted by oil company executives, supported by the generals, businessmen, and the CIA. The president was arrested, but less than 48 hours later, due to massive public pressure, he was reinstated.
Ellos han tenido una influencia directa, evidentemente. Es lo que se decía en esa época. Cada general costó $100 millones.
Once again, the CIA used its favorite weapons, dollars and manipulation. With widespread public support, Chavez took control of the Venezuelan oil company. 20,000 executives and employees who'd taken part in strikes and sabotage were fired.
You have a president in Venezuela who fancies himself as the reincarnation of Simon Bolivar. And the only thing he does, he takes the money from the oil industry. He doesn't even develop the oil industry. Venezuela produces less oil today than it produced since the first nationalization in the 70s. I mean, it's an absolute, the biggest disaster in the oil business today in the world is in Venezuela. But this guy is popular.
On May 1st, 2007, Chavez occupied the Orinoco oil fields, the last remaining in the hands of the Seven Sisters.
Venezuela es libre. Nuestro petróleo es nuestro. Gracias a la revolución bolivariana. ¡Que viva Venezuela libre! ¡Que viva la revolución!
The oil of the Orinoco is heavy and hard to extract. Chavez needed new technology. Chinese, Russian, and European companies were invited, and they swarmed in. Chavez could smile. Venezuela's reserves are estimated to be some of the biggest on the planet. This time, the American companies lost the battle for Venezuela. A new international diplomacy has emerged around the oil market. Soaring crude prices have reinforced the financial position and influence of oil-producing countries not under Washington's control: Russia, Iran, and Venezuela.
At $100 oil, we have an expression in American English. At $100 oil, Putin and Hugo Chavez are 1,000-pound gorillas, you know, images of King Kong, okay? At $40 oil, they are reduced to chimpanzees, okay? And they will do everything in their power to get the price of oil up to $100. So if we want to convert Chavez and Putin to chimpanzees, it's very simple. Encourage Saudi Aramco to produce more oil, and that would collapse the price of oil to $20, and that would create a hell of a problem for oil-producing countries that right now appear to be stronger than they really are.
April 20th, 2010. In Washington, the President of the United States is expected at the White House for a press conference. America has just suffered its worst ecological disaster. Deepwater Horizon, a BP oil rig, has exploded 80 kilometers off the American coast. 11 people are reported missing. The platform sinks 2 days later. At a depth of almost 4,000 meters, the damaged well spits out some 800 million liters of oil over 106 days. A record spill, with BP and Halliburton seen as responsible. In a restaurant in the heart of Washington's Chinatown, Barack Obama is on the television. He qualifies the catastrophe as an ecological 9/11. The oil companies must pay, and the president announces a moratorium and the suspension of offshore drilling. But after a few months, the moratorium is lifted. Drilling resumes. No one can stop the race for oil. And so the oilmen seek even further afield, in the far north, digging ever more holes. The tar-filled sands of Alberta in Canada represent some of the planet's biggest energy reserves. All the usual suspects are here: Exxon, Chevron, Shell, BP, Total, along with the Chinese CNOOC and Sinopec.
Les pétroliers, c'est leur jeu normal, repoussent toujours les limites, tentent de les repousser pour produire toujours plus de pétrole, pour satisfaire des besoins mondiaux croissants en pétrole et pour évidemment des raisons financières, car plus ils produisent et plus ils vendent de pétrole, plus ils gagnent de l'argent et ils sont là pour ça, notamment les compagnies pétrolières privées. Mais il y a des limites en termes de risque politique, en termes de risques géopolitiques, en termes de conséquences sur l'environnement, sur la sécurité.
The melting ice, due to global warming, is changing the map of the world. A new route is opening up, a northern sea passage, a commercial marine highway linking the markets of Southeast Asia and Europe. Russia has made the Arctic a strategic priority. The fabulous oil and gas reserves supposed to be here are on everyone's wish list. The United States, Canada, Denmark and Norway are all concerned about Russia's ambitious claims.
И мы заинтересованы в развитии Северно-морского пути Арктики, потому что это будущее России. Нефть, газ, алмазы, золото, апатиты, Норильский никель. Все это арктическая зона. А как по-другому?
On August 2nd, 2007, a Russian expedition planted a flag 4,267 meters below the geographic North Pole. A diplomatic bomb, a flag on the seabed, a way of saying to the world, the Arctic is Russian. In order to explore its fields in the Arctic, Russia has allied with the giant BP. The company responsible for the Gulf of Mexico disaster is providing finance, technology, and expertise. For Putin, oil means wealth and power. 25% of the oil imported into Europe is Russian, a precious energy connection that silences many a critical voice. And so the czars, dictators, and monarchs of the world continue to be courted by Paris, Washington, and all the world's capitals. America's former vice president and the former chairman of Halliburton, Dick Cheney, is once said to have remarked, "The good Lord did not see fit to give oil to democracies."
Je crois que pour Dick Cheney, si Dieu n'a pas jugé bon de donner le pétrole à des démocraties, les Américains n'ont pas souhaité vraiment installer des régimes démocratiques dans des États très riches en pétrole. C'est beaucoup plus facile d'exploiter les richesses des autres quand on a la complicité d'un dictateur.
On December 17th, 2010, a young Tunisian burns himself alive, and the fires of revolt are sparked throughout the Arab world. A wall of fear has fallen. A new generation voices its claims for freedom and a share of the oil rights enjoyed by the Gulf's ruling families or established clans. The Arab world rises up and the whole world trembles. Dictatorships collapse and monarchies waver. A terrible domino effect. A fire that seems to be raging as far as Saudi Arabia. Could the country known as the world's central oil bank also flare up?
Si un pays comme l'Arabie Saoudite était touché par l'instabilité actuelle, alors personne n'échapperait à la catastrophe. Parce que personne ne peut remplacer le pétrole saoudien. C'est même pas la peine d'y réfléchir. Là, les prix du pétrole s'envoleraient vers des niveaux qu'on n'a jamais vus. Non seulement on souffrirait d'un point de vue économique à cause de l'augmentation du prix, mais on manquerait carrément de pétrole. Ce serait vraiment la pénurie.
In Houston, the world's oil capital, no one in their worst nightmares could imagine serious shortages. The city lives and breathes oil. The Seven Sisters, and almost 1,000 other related companies, all have an address in Houston. Number 800 Bell Avenue, the Exxon building, the cathedral, the Vatican of the oil industry. On the 43rd and 44th floors is the Petroleum Club, the black gold aristocracy. 1,700 members, 500 of whom are dollar billionaires. It's the most exclusive club in the world. For the Petroleum Club at Exxon, it's Christmas every day.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey, jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Tonight, they're celebrating mergers, mega marriages with mega dowries. Exxon and Chevron are respectively marrying Mobil and Texaco, an American love story. BP ties the knot with Amoco, French Total weds Elf and Fina. The Anglo-Dutch Shell prefers to remain a bachelor. The Seven Sisters have no intention of dying. Once again, unity is strength. Exxon, Shell, Chevron, BP, and Total. Every year, the new quintet publishes record profit reports. Far from the filth of the oil fields, it's on the stock exchange ticker tape that the companies make their fortunes. Oil is the favorite prey of speculators. Every day, oil that doesn't exist is bought and sold.
Le montant des capitaux représentant ces transactions virtuelles sur le marché du pétrole papier est tel. Certains parlent de 5 fois, d'autres parlent de 20 fois le volume des quantités réelles transportées, achetées, vendues, consommées. Cet impact est considérable sur le prix du pétrole lui-même, car le seul caprice des spéculateurs, s'appuyant très souvent sur des formules mathématiques magiques, sur des martingales incroyables, fait varier le prix du pétrole sans rapport avec le jeu de l'offre et de la demande. C'est une des raisons pour laquelle on a vu parfois le prix du baril s'envoler pour des raisons qui n'avaient rien à voir avec le marché.
The sisters have come a long way since the hunting party on the Scottish moors and the infamous night of August 28, 1928, when their cartel was created in absolute secrecy to divide up the world. The seven voracious sisters. They swore that they would only relinquish their power when the last drop of oil had flowed and the last dollar bill burnt to ashes. They were proud, but as the old saying goes, pride goes before a fall.
The Seven Sisters were full with reserve, and they were independent oil companies, international independent oil companies. They did not have any attachment to the governments. Today, they have less reserve. They are dying. Some of them are dying because they are losing the reserve.
The sisters are no longer the only ones with the power, the know-how in the global battle for oil. They're not the only ones who are hungry. Nationalization of oil reserves around the world has ushered in a new generation of oil companies, all vying for a slice of the oil pie. They are the new Seven Sisters. From Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco, the largest and most sophisticated oil company in the world. From Russia, Gazprom, a company that Russia's latest Tsar, Vladimir Putin, wrested away from the oligarchs. The China National Petroleum Corporation, or CNPC, which along with its subsidiary PetroChina, is the world's second largest company in terms of market value. The National Iranian Oil Company, which has a monopoly on exploration, extraction, and transportation of crude oil in Iran, OPEC's second largest oil producer after Saudi Arabia. Venezuela's PDVSA, a company the late President Hugo Chavez dismantled and rebuilt into his country's economic engine and part of his diplomatic arsenal. Brazil's Petrobras, a leader in deep water oil production that pumps out 2 million barrels of crude a day. And from Malaysia, Petronas, Asia's most profitable company in 2012. Mainly state-owned, the new Seven Sisters control a third of the world's oil and gas production and more than a third of the world's reserves. The old Seven Sisters, by comparison, produce a tenth of the world's oil and control only 3% of the reserves. The balance has shifted.
They have to struggle to build up more reserve. That's, I agree with you. But, however, the core of the Seven Sisters will remain there because they have the technology. And they know they have the know-how. So it's going to be a new ball game.
A new ball game with new players. Something that perhaps the old Seven Sisters hadn't counted on. They've pillaged the world for almost a century and left poverty, war, and misery in their wake. In the suburbs of Houston, we meet Juan Parras and his son, the last watchman over the world's biggest oil refinery.
We all have dreams, and one of our dreams also would be to take the CEOs of ExxonMobil, of Shell, of BP, of Chevron, ConocoPhillips, any of those industries, Valero. We would love to take them on a toxic tour and show them the living conditions that people along their fence line live, just to show them, look, what are you doing for the communities? I know you're doing a lot for your shareholders. You know, you care about the profits, you care about your sales, you care about your productions. But every time the productions go down, you know, who pays the price for it? The community does. And even when the productions are high, who pays the price for it? The community does.
As night falls over Houston, smoke continues to rise from its Goliath refineries. Here, our journey through the story of the Seven Sisters comes to an end. But the toxic reality of that story continues to linger.